founder and chair of Brand Africa, Thebe Ikalafeng. Thank you so much for coming to CheckPoint the podcast.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
It's good to see you.
I made it. Where's my mother? No, thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thebe, I must just state from the outset that you and I are recording this a day before the much anticipated, awaited, feared June 30th, right?
Oh, yes. I mean,
where anti-immigrant or anti-migrant movements have basically given a deadline.
Correct.
To undocumented migrants to vacate South Africa by that 30th of June. It's tomorrow?
Yes.
How are you feeling about the day itself and the events that have led up to the day?
Well, first, I think it's an unfortunate day or date. It's unfortunate that as a country or even as a continent, we've had such deadlines, because I think it's a day and a date that South Africa could have avoided if South Africa had done the right things, and the right things being that creating a lawful institutions. For example, Home Affairs, as you know, selling visas and work permits for 500 rand, have created a lawless government, a lawless state, and a lawless state has created lawlessness in society. And that lawlessness, you cannot now, having created a lawless environmental condition, now try to hold people accountable to that. And I think how I feel about tomorrow, it's unfortunate that we have a date like that. It's absolutely unfortunate. We shouldn't be there.
This Abahambe, they must go thing is not a South African thing. It's happened elsewhere on the continent.
Oh, it's happened.
You think back in Nigeria, Ghana, even in Cote d'Ivoire, it's happened in Angola. You know, it's not a South African phenomenon.
Migration is not a South African problem. As you rightfully said, 1969, Ghana deported 200,000 Nigerians. 1983, Nigeria deported 1 million Ghanaians, 2 million people. As recently as 2024, Angola deported 200,000 people from the Congo. And of course, it's a deep problem. And this displacements and migration of Africans is a problem that I think should have been dealt with at a continental level, because it is not necessarily a South African problem. It's just that South Africa, being the most visible country, the one that was seen as the final frontier, if you will, of people running to South Africa, because all other countries have failed their citizens.
And
like South Africa has failed South Africans.
Yes, let's be frank. African governments, African leaders are displacing their own people.
Indeed. I mean, the fact that South Africa has got all Africans in South Africa, the rest of Africa is in South Africa. The fact that all of them are here, and illegally so. Many of them are illegal, as you've seen, with the droves of people who are being evacuated and those leaving the countries. Gives you an idea of what a big problem it is for anybody, by the way, to want to leave their country, their family, their place of origin. It takes a lot to do that. Whether it is in the instances of Libya, Mali, and all those, whether it's because of war or internal instability, or even Ethiopia, within Ethiopia, or whether it's between Rwanda and DRC, or whether all those migration or displacements are created by the governments themselves. Because if the governments can create stable environments for its own citizens, then they do not have to leave their countries. I am not saying that migration is not necessary, by the way. I think migration is important. It's important to have people moving around, because that's what grows all of us. That's what also brings in a different, if you will, texture to every country. But it has to be legal. It has to be regulated, like every other country does.
And it's not just South Africa that's absorbing this displacement. I mean, I think there are more Zimbabweans in London today than there are in Harare.
Indeed, as a matter of fact, it's and if you go for I remember a story when I was in Guinea-Bissau, and my taxi driver said to me, 24, you're driving a taxi, which is not a problem, by the way, because we can all choose whatever. And I said, but just tell me a little bit about yourself. And he says to me, well, didn't I finish university a year or two ago? I can't find a job. And he says, I'm just one of many statistics here. I decided to walk, and it took him a year to walk from Guinea-Bissau to end up in Libya. When he got to Libya, he was then detained as a slave and enslaved in Libya, and he was rescued by the United Nations and had to be repatriated back to his country, Guinea-Bissau, after like a year or two later. And I said to him, but why did you leave your country? He says, where were you going? He says, I was trying to go to Italy. I was trying to go to Europe because they've got better opportunities than we do. Our countries are a mess right now. They need to do better.
So I found it interesting when you wrote in your opinion piece a couple of weeks ago that Afro-phobia is the African Union's biggest challenge. Do you think African leaders care?
Well, the problem with the challenge with the AU is that it seems to be a getting together or a collection of governments rather than rather than a coalition of government towards a bigger deal. I think we're still stuck in the idea of independence rather than freedom, if you will, because many of them, remember, the organization was around freeing Africans. What they have not been able to do for a long time is economic freedom, and until we achieve economic freedom, we are not going to be able to create a place at a state for our own citizens to find opportunities in our countries. I mean, if you look at this, to me, I think this is state failure or continental failure. The fact that we import over $150 billion of food in a continent that is 65% arable land is a problem. The fact that we are exporting our critical minerals and all kinds of minerals en masse in exchange for finished goods is a problem. And as Ali Mazrui said, he says Africa produces what it doesn't consume and consumes what it doesn't produce. To me, it's a failure of not just a state level, but a continental level. I think the African Union has a lot to answer to. I think there's a lot to answer to because it is the one place where in 1963, when they all got together, there was a blueprint of how to move the continent forward. And part of that blueprint was security, was economics, was open borders and all those. But none of those have really been achieved to the benefit of its own citizens.
Yes, because the African leaders have attained their own personal economic freedom. They're fine.
Unfortunately,
they're doing very well.
Well, unfortunately, what we do here in our continent, as you know very well, is when they campaign, they are like us. And when they win the elections, they are unlike us. They actually are deities. We now actually have to obey them. We actually now have to, on the highways, we have to move away from them. We have to provide them with a house in Cape Town, a house in Joburg. We have to provide them with maids. We have to provide them, and they are the gods.
Yes.
They are the gods, and we are just the servants to them, instead of actually being the beneficiaries. I think we need to reverse the role a little bit for everybody to realize that the reason we call them public servants is because they're supposed to be in the service of creating a better life for its citizens. And I'm speaking now in a narrow South African lens, but you can apply that across the whole continent. I mean, if you see, I don't understand. I was in Zimbabwe the other day, and I was on the highway, or going from the airport to the main city, Harare, and I had to dodge big holes and all those. And I said to myself, surely this is the main road to the city. You want to tell me that the president doesn't go through here? You can go to even our country, our president on his own street. You want to tell me that in his own street, he's not aware of what happens in his own street? Are you with me? Those are the challenges that we have in this country.
They're up in the air. They fly.
Well, I think when they get into, I think when they get into the position, they are removed from society. They are no longer one of us. They are now in an elevated status. And we are in the service of keeping them there, rather than holding them accountable and saying to them, when you went out to campaign, you said you're going to put in 1 million houses in Tembisa. Where are the houses? Those are sort of, and that's just, I'm speaking now through a South African lens as an example.
Yes. I look at March on March and all these movements and the protests that have been happening, and I think to myself, my goodness, if you were in Kenya, some of you would be dead. If you were in Zimbabwe, many of you would have been arrested. You know what I mean?
I know, and it's all very not a good thing, by the way,
for us to say, go back home and solve your own problems. But just merely protesting in some of these countries can be a death sentence.
It is a death sentence. It is dangerous to protest. It is dangerous to exercise some of the freedoms we in South Africa perhaps take even for granted, because we do take them for granted, these freedoms. The only problem is that we actually we don't use them towards our greater benefit as a society. We are very, very nonchalant about these freedoms.
So when you call on the African Union, leaders that I believe really don't care about their own citizens, what do you hope to achieve?
Well, I mean, I'm in and out of the African Union, and I've looked at it and I said, what can I do from my lens? For my lens, it's a branding lens. My lens is it's ensuring that we create the brands which are made in Africa, which create jobs in Africa, which create industries. And because here's a stark reality. Out of the study that I've done for the last 15 years, 16 years, Brand Africa, Africa's best brands, only 20% of the brands that Africans admire are made in Africa. Yet 80% of the Africans say they believe in Africa. So there's a massive paradox, a disconnect between our passions for our continent, but support for that which is made in Africa. So my role, my lens, when I work with the African Union, I don't understand politics. I don't understand many other things, but what I do understand is brands. And I think it is incumbent on every single African to ask themselves, you from a media perspective, me from a branding perspective, says, how can you contribute towards a bigger idea? I mean, we're in Ethiopia with Addis Ababa, which is the political capital of the continent. We're there in May this year with the African Union, who are supportive of the idea and are looking at how can we do that which was promised in 1963. Which is to create industries or to industrialize the continent. And I'm looking at it as says the way to do it is you need to create more Dangotes, more Ethiopian Airlines, more Safaricom's, more M-Pesas, more MTNs, because if you do more of those, you are creating jobs and you are creating industries and you are retaining the taxes, and the taxes should go towards the public goods that we so desire here. But then it calls for another part, which I'm not perhaps as good at, which is now how do we hold them accountable when they collect the taxes to put them to the right use? So all of us, I think, have got a responsibility in terms of how are you going to contribute towards the Africa that we want. So migration is one, brands is one, media is one, and rights, freedom of expression is another. There's multiple things that we need to do to move this continent forward. From my end, it's from a brand-led perspective.
The other disconnect is that it makes sense for African governments, African leaders, business people on the continent to speak about African unity and open borders, free trade between countries. But I don't know how much that benefit trickles down to the ordinary man, or how they feel about open borders, as opposed to a business person, for example, who obviously benefits from open borders, free trade, etc. I just worry that there isn't enough buy-in from the ordinary man in the street when it comes to this African solidarity and African unity.
I think it's because we have not brought it down to that ordinary person.
Why have we not?
But if you look at, if you look at, let's say, if you open up the borders and you free up the skies. Last week I was in Morocco. I had to go to Paris to come down to Morocco. There were one or two others going directly, but they were inconvenient. And it cost me more money because I had to go to Morocco to come down. So now the benefit for the ordinary person, if you open up the skies, if you will, is the costs come down, it becomes easier for me to be able to move around the continent.
But who's communicating that message to people on the ground? Because they are faced with, I have no job, I have no house, these foreign illegal immigrants are in the clinics, and so I have to wait all day for my turn, etc. That is what they're faced with.
That's
on
what
a
they're faced with.
day-to-day
What they also
basis.
face, and what they're also faced with is when they do try to become entrepreneurs to move goods across the borders, they get taxed in multiple ways, both from a corruption. They have to pay bribes, and then they still have to pay the normal rates of crossing the borders. So it is very costly for them even to try find a way to make a living, if you will. What needs to happen? We can communicate all we want, by the way. What we need to do is we need to put action to this. So communication to me is not the issue. The issue is let us make sure we do what we say and not talk and just it's because you know what we do. I mean, we know it. Come here to South Africa, and we can speak about our country with credibility. Come here to our country. We have wonderful English documents put down in a language which landed here in 1652, and others landed here much earlier, 1910. And we can put them down beautifully, these languages. But we actually do not deliver on those promises, because to us we seem to think that the theory or the words and these big, beautiful documents, that we even have events to launch the documents instead of events to say, matter of fact, I don't even think government should have events, by the way, to launch new houses, to do all this. I think it's their job. We don't need a launch of new houses, a launch of a new road, a launch of a stadium. We don't need none of those ribbon things. It is not an occasion, it's an obligation. So what we need to do is we need to just do what we need to do and keep it moving. We will evaluate you when we vote.
You've spoken about a continent-wide migration framework. What do you mean by that?
We need Africans themselves to get together around a table and say that, how do we prevent all this? So clearly there's issues around borders, because I think there's issues around borders. There's issues around opportunities within the countries. There's issues about and economic issues. And I think once we can create those challenges, we can overcome those challenges and agree as a continent. I mean, this weekend I was listening to the African National Congress Secretary General talking about, we don't have refugee camps in South Africa. But unfortunately, if you go to Kenya, you go to everywhere else, there's refugee camps everywhere because of the displacements of people. So we need to get and ask people. For example, in Burkina Faso, if you look at Traore has said that my diaspora, put money here, let's solve the problem. He says, let's create factories. Let's pay our debt. All of a sudden, those opportunities are now, well, I haven't been there recently, but at least what I read about is all of a sudden now those opportunities have created an opportunity for people to stay in the country and not try to escape to other countries. To me, an immigration framework speaks to how we are going to deal with a migration framework, how we are going to deal with migration across the continent, how we're going to deal internally in the countries and across borders, because it's that as well. It's not just because remember there's internal displacement, there's also cross-border displacement. But the root cause of all those is got nothing to do with the fact that our borders are porous. We never had borders before 1884. We never had borders. People were able to move around, and they move around with ease. But they were moving around with trade, moving around goods, moving around tribes, moving around culture. That's not a problem. The problem that we have with borders right now, it's the fact that people are moving around because of the one root cause, and the root cause is the governments have failed their people in each and every country. By the way, there is no one country that one can point at, because even a country as amazing as Rwanda, which has done well, you find Rwandese immigrants here in South Africa. Yeah. You find Burundian.
There's some freedoms that go beyond economic.
There's some freedoms which go beyond. So it's a combination of political, economic, and social freedoms. If you can deal with those three to create a proper migration framework, I think that's what we should be looking at.
I suspect that some of these African leaders actually don't mind their people leaving. Because many of these
it's less
people,
of their problems.
Exactly. They reduce the pressure of delivery from them. If you look at, I've been looking at remittances, money that is sent from South Africa, from other countries, back to these migrants' home countries.
Even a country as what you would think as unstable as Somalia, the amount of remittances that come in from diaspora, that should be, as a start, enough to rebuild any country, as a start.
Yes.
Of the African nationals who were seeking to leave South Africa in the lead-up to mass action on June 30th, Nigerians are by far the biggest contributors of remittances to their home country. $21.3 billion a year, representing 11.3% of that country's GDP, according to the latest figures published by the World Bank. The US, UK, and Gulf countries are Nigeria's main remittance sources. At $3.6 billion a year, the money Zimbabweans send back home represents 8.4% of their country's GDP. South Africa remains Zimbabwe's largest remittance corridor. Ghanaians generate $2.9 billion in remittances a year, or 3.7% of their country's GDP, money sent mainly from the UK and US. Uganda receives $2.5 billion deposited from the UK, US, and South Africa yearly. Congolese nationals generate $2 billion with Angola as the DRC's main remittance source, followed by France, the Republic of the Congo, South Africa in fourth place, ahead of Belgium. Lesotho, Mozambique, Malawi, and Eswatini nationals send $476, $267, $264, and $85 million annually from South Africa.
I mean, Lesotho, for example, 20% of the GDP is from remittances. People who work mainly in South Africa who are sending money back home. Nigeria, 11%. Many of these, Nigerians are all over the world.
Not just in
South Africa. Exactly. Not just in South Africa. So, and these are productive human resources.
Which should be directed to the countries themselves.
Exactly. But if they were in those countries, they probably would be agitators.
Yes.
And they would agitate for change.
Yes.
And
that will not be welcome in many countries.
Exactly. So my sense is that these African leaders are like, they must go.
Keep the promise there and send me the money back home.
Exactly.
Well, I hope that. I hope that, but it does, on the face of it, it does look like that, right? And I think part of that migration framework should deal with that. That's why I say it's political, economic, as well as social that they need to deal with. Because from a political perspective, if you resolve the internal challenges in Mali and in Libya, now people are settled down. And Sudan, for example, if you look at just those three countries, just the displacements in and out of those countries is crazy. So if you can resolve that, you are now have an opportunity for people at least to not feel the urge or the urgency rather to have to leave to find the basic place, roof over their heads, security and food for themselves. If you look at in Kenya 2 years ago with when the Gen Z stormed the parliament, they actually effected some kind of change. But it may not have been sustained. Many of them died. Yes, many of them. But I'm saying that for us to get the freedoms as a continent, unfortunately, many of our predecessors died. So it was almost a terrible sacrifice that many people had to do. And I think what the Kenyans did, for example, what the Gen Zs did when they stormed the parliament and all those, and many unfortunately were killed, they were just saying, this is our future. We have to take control of it. And the changes that they effected because of that. Remember, the president, W.S. Aruto, had to change the composition of government. He dissolved government, changed the government. I think parliamentarians now realize that these guys have got my phone number. They've got my house number. They're sending people to go and hold me accountable at home. So the challenge is Africans, we are very, very impatient people. Or what's the right word? We run out of steam.
We've run out of steam
to
fight for our rights.
To fight for our rights. So what we then do in South Africa, they always say things like, what can I do? They'll still do what they want. So we shouldn't. We should be. So even the Kenyans, they did this. Then they stopped. In Nigeria with the SARS, if you will, they did this. They were killed and they ran away. Kenyans went a step further. Tunisians with the Arab Spring, and all those. So what will ultimately happen in this continent and in the country by country? You will have an African Spring that will be disastrous for everyone. To me, that is the worst outcome that could happen, but it could be the one thing that will lead to ultimate change if we hold the leaders accountable, if we assert our rights that we have earned by being citizens. Remember, your citizenship earns you the right to ask to demand service.
You have access to some of these leaders. What do you think is going on in their minds? I mean, some of them don't even invest in healthcare. But the minute they're sick, they hop onto a plane.
Go to London.
They go overseas
for treatment.
What kind of a human being does that?
So when Makufuli's wife was ill, the late Makufuli, he insisted she goes to a public hospital. And it's the right thing. You must stay in a public hospital. When Kenneth Kaunda became president, he insisted that all primary school to high school of anybody who's a public servant must be in the country, as is the primary health. He insisted that they should do that. I think that's what should occupy them, that for every dollar that you take out of the country running to Russia to be running to England, running to America, running to Singapore, every dollar that you take out to go there, it's in multiple times you are taking it out of your system. You're taking it out of your ability to build equal system or even better systems at home.
They know that.
But they know
do
that.
It anyway.
The challenge, I guess, from a South African perspective, why perhaps South Africa has to take ownership of that challenge, is the manner in which the citizens have responded is not how we should have dealt with it. Accepting that we understand the level of frustration that they reached and they couldn't get anywhere. But the manner, killing people is not human. It's not humane. It's just been inhumane. So there should not be if you will, a choice between lawfulness and humanity. We can do both well. And I think we've been inhumane in how we've dealt with this as a people. It has created a different look on who we are as a people, as South Africans. It's made us look as uncaring and callous people. So that part, I guess we have to correct about us. We need to introspect. On the 1st of July, if every single undocumented foreigner leaves South Africa, on the 1st of July, the hospitals will still be underserviced. There still won't be jobs because we have completely gotten rid of the industries. We've opened up malls and not factories. So there still will not be jobs. There still will not be supplies because too much corruption in the health sector, if you will. You can look at the country as it is. The question is not tomorrow. The question is the day after tomorrow. How different will South Africa be? How are we going to react differently as a country to this crisis? What it says is that brand Africa is very unstable.
Do you have hope?
Of course I have hope. We have hope as long as you have people who are alive and there is a day called tomorrow. You must have hope. Because if we give up hope now, then we are going to be destroyed as a continent and we will never, ever again recover. I must have hope. The reasons I do the things I do is because I'm hopeful to the continent. The reason I'm driving a brand-led agenda is because I'm saying that we must do what Mother Teresa urged us to do. Do what you can with what you have where you are. So I'm doing with what I can, with what I have, what I know from a branding perspective, where I am. Driving a positive narrative enabling the creation or catalyzing the creation of African brands and celebrating them to set examples for others to follow. If we all do that, this continent will recover.
Thank you so much, Thebe.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate you. Really do.